Aloha, everybody, and welcome to this special episode of the Triple F podcast, Faith and Family First. And we are going to be talking about something you are hearing every day, whether you're watching TV or listening to the radio, all this craziness about gender ID. What does that mean? And what does God call us to be? Let's chat about that. Aloha, everybody, and I'm so proud to be here today with a friend from across the seas, somebody I've known for several years now. He works with Focus on the Family, Jeff Johnston. Welcome to the show today, Jeff.
Hey, Eva, it's great to be with you. Thanks for having me on your broadcast.
I love it. What we don't want people to know is all the mischief you and I get into when we go to our conferences.
Oh, right. We won't say anything about that.
Absolutely not.
What happens there stays there.
Yes. So, Jeff, what I want to start with, because some of our listeners and our viewers may not know, who is this Jeff Johnson from Focus on the Family, and why do you do what you do? So why don't you give us a little bit of a testimony so we can introduce you to our people here?
Sure. Well, I was hired about 15 years ago by Focus on the Family. And part of the reason I was hired was to tell my story about leaving homosexuality. I grew up in a Christian home. I was born and raised in San Diego, California. And although I grew up Christian, I grew up believing in Jesus, I was struggling with looking at pornography, with same-sex attractions, with all kinds of issues that, I didn't tell anybody about. That's what good Christian boys did back in the day. You kind of struggled in silence and you didn't talk about these things. And really back then, nobody in the church was really addressing these issues either. And then when I was in my 20s, this was in the 1980s, I was invited to a conference called Hope and Healing for the Homosexual. And honestly, I was scared to death to go to this conference. I'd never been to anything like that. I'd never heard about anything like that. And at this conference, I heard a speaker, Andy Comiskey, and it was the very first time I heard anyone say that they had left homosexuality, and where they talked about some of the reasons why somebody might struggle with these same-sex attractions, why I was struggling. So that began my journey out. It was not an easy road. Doesn't mean I'm totally 100%, but God has done a lot of work healing and bringing transformation into my life and into my heart. Along the way, he used a lot of different things to bring healing to me, including counseling with professional counselors. I attended conferences, prayer, his Holy Spirit, the power of the Spirit really moved in my life at different times. His word, he used all kinds of things to bring me out of homosexuality and into more wholeness. Along the way, I got married, and we've had 3 boys. They're all in their 20s now, so we've been married almost 30 years now. It'll be 30 years in July. And I was hired by Focus initially to tell that story. Along the way, I also helped run support groups for people struggling with same-sex attractions and for their family and for their friends. My job at Focus has shifted some. I'm a culture and policy analyst now, and I'm a staff writer for Focus's The Daily Citizen, which is our culture and policy outlet. So I kind of wear 2 hats. To some degree, I'm doing ministry work and helping people one-on-one, helping Focus respond to constituents. And then I'm also dealing with the policy side of things. What's happening in the culture, what's happening in state legislatures, what should Christians be aware of, and then what can they do when they're confronted with these issues?
I've got a question for you, since I know that's your background. How did people in the LGBT community react towards you when you came out? Because, so many people talk about that experience, and then, love is love. We're going to accept everybody. But if you try to leave the culture, how were you received?
Well, my story is a little bit different. I fought the gay identity, and I fought having that identity for a lot of years. And when I started my healing journey, I had not really identified as gay. And then a couple of years into that process, I actually had my first relationship. It was with a guy from one of the support groups I was involved with. And then that relationship ended, and I started clubbing, and I started meeting different people and doing some really scary stuff, going home with people I didn't know, having sex with guys I didn't know. And I finally came to the end of myself, and I said, okay, God, I'm either going to go on and be gay, or I'm going to follow you, even if these feelings never go away. And I decided to follow Christ, even if my feelings never changed. And a lot of people talk about the church and how they respond to people struggling with these issues. But I found nothing but grace and support and help in the church. There was a whole group of male friends, especially, that I developed relationships with, a mentor and a couple guys that I was in accountability with in my home group. And they were really instrumental in my healing along the way. And it was their love and acceptance that helped me grow in my sense of who I was as a man, in my masculine identity. And along the way, some of my same-sex attractions began to change. And that was when I began to be attracted to my wife, and we started a relationship and married. So it was really through the church that my healing came. And I found a great deal of love and support from Christians.
And really, that's how it should be. I do hear stories of, Bible thumping people, telling people they're going to go to hell if they don't change their lifestyle. But so basically, you were already experiencing this unwanted same sex attraction, but you had people walking alongside you with love and with mercy and with grace.
Exactly. I don't know that anyone rejected me because of my struggle. If they did, I'm not aware of them. I found a great deal of love and support along the way. And you're right, that's what the church should be doing. And I think a lot of Christians want to do that. They don't always know how to come alongside people and support them. But most Christians I found, when I told my story, they're loving and they're accepting towards me.
So what do you say to parents now? Because fast forward it now to 2023, and you got kids that are not only struggling now with same sex attractions, but now they're even denying who God created them to be. They could be a woman, they could be a man, they could be somewhere in between, and the whole list of Jim Hochberg, my normal partner on the show, always says the alphabet group. We
That's
can't
right.
keep up with them. But I'm so. Are you hearing more and more from people that are wondering how they minister to their children?
So LGBT ideology is being pushed everywhere in the culture, from education to arts and entertainment. It's all over the media. And the push now is for accepting and celebrating homosexuality and transgenderism as if this were somebody's true identity, if that's who they really were. So the pressure is on the other foot right now. Parents are feeling this pressure where they're being told this is who your child is, and you're unkind and unloving if you don't accept it and celebrate it and embrace it. You mentioned the whole gender identity thing. When I was a little boy, 4 or 5 years old, there were times I wanted to be a girl. And I know I spent more time playing with my sisters than I did with boys. I identified them. I identified with them. I identified with my mom. I have no doubt that if I were growing up today, some teacher, some person in authority would have begun pushing me towards embracing a female identity. And that's the kind of pressure we're seeing today. Every generation, from boomers on down to Generation Z, there are more and more people identifying as LGBT. And millennials and Gen Z, especially, the numbers have just skyrocketed. And I think a lot of that is because the culture is pressuring people and pushing people towards that ideology.
Well, I'm gonna confess to something right now, and I don't mind. I was sharing with your counterpart up there, Glenn Stanton, this story from my childhood. So I was one of those girls who developed very early. So I was a young developer. I had 3 brothers, no sisters. And you want to talk about body dysmorphia? I absolutely hated being a girl. I hated everything there was to being a girl. I didn't want to look like a girl. I didn't want to stand out anymore. I was teased horrendously, especially
Hmm.
by the boys in my school. And so to this day, I do not wear dresses. Even though I think that now I can celebrate being female. when I was 11 and 12 and 13, and these are formative years, I absolutely despised everything about being a girl. So I agree with you. If I existed today, people would be saying, you're probably a boy. And maybe they would have given me some, some medication, some hormones without my parents noticing. And I think that's what scares a lot of parents today, is that these things are happening without the parents knowing in some schools.
You're absolutely right. Especially on social media, there's all this information now about how to transition to become the opposite sex. There's information about where to find puberty blockers and opposite sex hormones, and even Planned Parenthood clinics now are dispensing opposite sex hormones, sometimes even without a child visiting a counselor or a psychiatrist or having a really evaluation. The teenager just goes in and says, hey, I'm struggling with this. This is who I am. I want to be a boy. And these powerful drugs get dispensed to these children. So social media has been really spreading this like wildfire. In fact, there was a study done a few years back. This woman, Lisa Littman, she interviewed hundreds of parents of girls who were transitioning together in groups. And she found that a lot of them had been traumatized. A lot of them had other mental health issues, and they were binging on social media, on this transgender social media. And nowadays, too, we're also seeing the push from schools, where schools and school districts, even some states, have transgender policies. And part of those policies say, if a child comes to you as a teacher, you're not supposed to go tell the parent. The parent might not be safe for that child. And so the parent becomes the enemy. And these kids are often coached on social media or even by counselors and teachers about the language they use, about how they identify, and how to come out to their parents. Some of them are told to tell their parents, well, if you don't accept me, I might just go hurt myself. And so they're using emotional blackmail on their parents, and they're learning this from the culture. It's being pushed through the culture.
I
And
think,
like you said, if we were grown up today, we would have been definitely pushed that direction.
I think so. And when you hear the stories, even from public school teachers, even they are now faced with all these kids that are suddenly coming out. Recently, somebody told me that right here in Hawaii, in one of the classrooms, they're noticing almost an 11% increase in girls identifying as either a boy or asexual, or I can't keep up with all the terms. So depending on what they feel today, I think Jim and I are at the Capitol and we're watching people testify, and they're wearing reindeer ears. I mean, it's like whatever you want to be today. The world wants to celebrate and rejoice. So I don't know. I think this is going to become a bigger subject every day because, again, like you mentioned, we have legislators that are passing bills that are just getting worse and worse and worse. So I want to be positive, though, because I know that there are parents out there that might be wondering, like they have this child that maybe is acting a little different. I mean, what would you say to those parents? How do you react when your child suddenly identifies as an eel?
You're right. There's so many different identities being invented by transgender activists. We encourage parents to do a couple of things. First of all, maintain a relationship with your child. That's probably the most important thing. Children need attachment to their mom and dad. And it's so important for parents not to overreact, not to reject their child, but to maintain that connection, to maintain dialogue about these issues. And we even suggest that parents start earlier teaching their children what God's design is, that biology and scripture say there are two sexes, male and female, and that's how God designed us, and that's a good thing. As your child is growing up, parents can bless their child's, if it's a girl, they can bless her femininity and encourage it. If it's a boy, bless his masculinity and encourage that. So there's things parents can do even before a child gets a little bit older and starts to discover some of these issues. But when the child comes out, or you find out that your kid's been looking at all these transgender videos on social media, it's important not to overreact and to maintain that relationship. You don't want to reject your child. At the same time, though, it's important to hold on to biblical truth, that God designed us male and female, and He designed marriage to be between a man and a woman. And we can talk to our kids and dialogue with them about why those things are important. And here at Focus on the Family, we've developed some resources to help parents that way. One of the resources, these are free downloadable booklets, and I can send you some of the links, Eva, but one of them is when a loved one says I'm gay, a guide for parents, or there's another one called When Transgender Issues Enter Your World. And parents can read these, and then there's links to other books and resources that are really helpful in helping parents maintain that connection, but also hold on to biblical and scientific truth about what humanity is.
You make a really good point about having that connection with your child. I was thinking about, some of the school shootings that have happened. Parents suddenly are shocked when they look at their child's drawings that they were doing, right? Parents really need to be paying attention to what their kids are experiencing. Watch what they're watching on YouTube. What I did when I got custody of my grandson, he was so mad because sure, I let him watch YouTube and everything, but he had to do it in the living room on the living room TV when I was right there. And so he couldn't access anything that he wasn't supposed to. I mean, he'd get annoyed because he thought he was too old for that. But I think if we're aware of what our kids are experiencing, then we might be able to help them. But we've got to make that connection first.
You're absolutely right. We have twin boys who are now 22. They didn't get cell phones till they were seniors. And it was mostly to help them with calling us when they needed a ride or letting us know when wrestling practice was older. We're finding out more and more how much social media and all this screen time that is made available to kids, how damaging that is. Because children, you mentioned your body, your discomfort with your body and your discomfort with your growing femininity. A lot of that now comes because kids are comparing themselves to everybody and everything they see on social media. And they're comparing the way they feel inside to other people's outsides. And that's never healthy to do. And so we want to help our kids embrace who God made them to be. And there's things you can do to encourage a boy, even if he's not necessarily, stereotypically masculine. You can encourage him in his masculinity. Talk about how men initiate and how they protect people and some of the things that men do that aren't necessarily stereotypes, but they're characteristics. And the same thing with women. We want to talk about how women are powerful in their ability to connect and to nurture and care for people. And we can bless that in our children. They need to know that we love them as they are, as a boy or as a girl. And even if they're exploring weird identities, we still need to affirm them and maintain that relationship with them.
I have to laugh because I know one of the social media stars right now is Dylan Mulvaney. And everybody's talking about him. And I was trying to figure out, because he did this Days of Girlhood. And so I was trying to figure out how many days I've been a girl, because I wanted to do day 5,633 of being a woman, and especially a woman of age, because I think it's real cutesy to look at what it's like being a woman, when you're day 10. But, some of us women who have been women forever, we have a different story to tell. There is something beautiful about being man and being woman and rejoicing in that. And I think that men and women, the parents that are listening to us, they need to rejoice too. I think that women need to be proud of being a woman and men need to be proud of being a man. And I think our kids are going to copy us, and they are going to, they might be different. My mom, she did not know how to handle me growing up because my mom was a strong woman. She was the oldest of like 11 kids. So she didn't have time to style her hair and wear makeup and all that. So my mom was a real strong lady. So, here I am, struggling with my femininity. And she's like, just, get over it, step over life. So I think that connection that we talked about is really important. That's how kids grow into this specialness that God created them. So in these last couple of minutes, do you have some, maybe some words of hope, maybe for someone who's listening who is struggling with their identity?
Absolutely. I believe God is powerful and that he loves us and that he can bring healing to us. I've seen that in my own life. A lot of people who struggle with homosexuality, part of their struggle, for men, it's a struggle with masculinity and their identity and what it means to be male. And God did a lot to bring affirmation and hope and healing to me. Um, I wrote an article some years ago. It was called "What Do We Mean When We Talk About Change?" And a lot of people think, it should be an instant change. You go immediately from gay to straight, or you go immediately from struggling with your gender identity to being totally at peace. And God doesn't usually work that way. It's a process that involves time, but he is powerful, and he brings change in a lot of areas. Changes in relationships, changes in our attitudes, changes in my heart. I mean, I had to learn that homosexuality wasn't my biggest sin. Some of the hatred and bitterness and resentment I carried in my heart was much deeper than my same-sex attractions, and God had to bring healing to those things. Changes in our focus in life, changes in how we relate to him and how we relate to other people. God is so good, and he uses so many different means to bring healing to people. And parents whose children are struggling with this, you can be part of that means of change as well for your child. You can be one of the avenues that God uses to bring hope and healing and transformation in life to your children.
And give that website address again for Focus on the Family in case anybody wants to look for those resources. And we will make those links available.
Okay, great. Well, some of them are available at dailycitizen.org. That's where I write. And then we've also got a lot of resources at focusonthefamily.com. And if people just do a search for whatever it is they're looking for, transgender, homosexuality, they'll find links to lots of different resources that are available.
That's really great. And just again, so that our viewers and listeners are aware, Hawaii Family Forum is a 501c3 organization, and we are in close connection with Focus on the Family, which is also a C3 organization. So, and we appreciate all the work that Focus on the Family is doing, because you guys have to help people understand the issues so that when we're down at the Capitol yelling at people, they have some resources in hand. So thank you for that. We do have a little bit of time left. I'm curious as to where you think society is going. I mean, so you talked a little bit about where you came from and what we're looking at now. Where do you think we're going?
Where do I? It's kind of funny because I remember sitting around a table with our news team about 10 years ago, and I said, "You know where this is headed, right? We're moving towards kink and towards transgenderism." And their jaws dropped and they looked at me. I had to explain what kink was. People can look it up. Oh no, don't look it up online. Anyway, it's dark sexuality, and their jaws dropped, and they said, "We can't talk about those things on family friendly radio." And I'm thinking, well, the church has to start somewhere talking about these issues.
Well, I can actually jump in real quick, and people can picture this very easy. All they've got to do is go on Google and look up the Grammys, the recent Grammys, and the craziness that took place. I mean, you want to talk about where we're headed. I mean, don't you think that's a good picture?
I think you're absolutely right. What we were watching on the Grammys, it was pagan Baal worship of old gods of sexuality. The other place I think we're going, besides some of this dark stuff, I was watching an interview with Carl Trueman. He's written a book about how did our culture get here? If you had asked his grandfather, in the 90s, can a man be trapped in a woman's body? His grandfather would have laughed at this. And here we are 30 years later. It's 30 years past the 90s, and people are swallowing this wholesale and they're believing it. And at the end of his interview, and you'll be able to find this on Focused Pastor pretty soon. That's a new resource that Focus is developing for people. It's for pastors and churches. And it's Carl Trueman, and he's written about these issues. But at the end of his interview, he said, "I think the next thing is going to be transhumanism." And that can run two different directions. There are transhumanisms who believe I'm more than human. I might be part fairy. I might be part alien. I might be part some other entity.
I'm part Vulcan.
Exactly. If you can do that hand thing, I can't do it. But
I forgot how it's. Yeah, I forgot.
But the other thing it's going to transhumanism is about is connecting us to machines, where we're connected to computers, or our bodies are connected to computers, and it's part of trying to give us, you know, extra abilities that we don't have right now. Or and some people believe that we'll be able to live forever through artificial intelligence. But I think the church is going to have to wrestle with and address these issues. We can't stay silent about it.
That's actually a really good point to make. I think that so many parents feel beat up now with what's happening out there that they're kind of sticking their head in the sand. And I remember a Protestant pastor saying one time that when you stick your head in the sand, you pose a very tempting target to the devil.
Exactly.
And so I think that that's a good reminder that parents, again, going back to what we said earlier, they need to pay attention and see what their kids are experiencing. My daughter, okay, so back when True Blood came out, you remember that show? True Blood, way back when? I was actually watching that in the beginning, Jeff. And my daughter came home one night with her boyfriend when I was watching this show. And right when they walked in the door, there was a very obnoxious scene that should not have been taking place in my house. And my daughter got kind of surprised, her and her boyfriend, and they left the room. She told me later, first of all, she was surprised that I would watch something so horrible like that, because I'm normally not like that. But the other thing, too, was that her impression of me changed. And, you know, from that day to this, now I am hypersensitive about what is on the TV. And I wasn't even like, I didn't even think about it in any other way, but I need to be responsible for what I watch. And that's a good message for people. So, so in this last minute, what is your biggest challenge to people?
I think the biggest challenge, I think the biggest challenge is how to deal with our anger about these issues. I mean, when I hear about children who are being injected with these powerful drugs, with puberty blockers and opposite sex hormones, and then they're having these surgeries that mutilate them, when I realize what's happening on YouTube and on social media and in the entertainment world, it's really easy for me to get angry. And some of that I think is righteous and some of it's justified. But we have to be careful when we're dealing with individuals that we're not expressing that kind of anger and bitterness towards them. With individuals, I encourage people to lead with love. While you're holding to the truth, you still lead with love. And then when we're dealing with social issues, we want to lead with the truth, but we still have to maintain that love. And that's very difficult. And I've had to ask God a lot to deal with my own heart and my own reactions. Because children hear that. They hear if you have contempt for somebody or for a group of people, or if you have bitterness in your heart, they'll pick those things up. And I think we have to be constantly asking God to heal and redeem and transform our own hearts and lives.
And there's no better way to end that. Thank you so much, Jeff, for spending some time with us today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Eva. It's lovely to be with you. Someday, maybe I'll be there in person with you. That'd be great.
We're hoping for that. And for you viewers and listeners, stay plugged in. Make sure you share, like, subscribe to us on YouTube. And the rest of you, you want this content to continue. We kind of need partners. So for the rest of you, we'll see you next week. Mahalo, everybody. Mahalo, Jeff.